emerging from a dawn mist is a natural way to come upon this island. Seamus Heaney wrote, "We have no prairies to slice a sky at evening. Everywhere the eye concedes to encroaching horizon." Here, history stands up in the monuments of saints and scholars, who, from Celtic times, made it a hub of learning. In Ireland's mix of people and influences, the written word is still the magic coin, an international currency. The pens of W.B. Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, James Joyce, and others strike universal music from the tempo and temper of their people. This land has left its mark on Ireland's people, and they in turn have made their mark on the world's esteem. In Ireland, the past is ever present. Monasteries punctuate the priorities and patterns of living of a nearly 2,000-year-old Christianity. These were the dynamos of prayer and learning, driving a commerce of God, a trade in thoughts. The works of man have only lightly marked the land. The fields are a startling fresh green, unlined by many fences or hemmed in regular portions. Nor do the Irish have neat and tidy thoughts, not too much going by the book, nor bounded within straight and ruly lines. Almost grudgingly, they've consented to live and work in towns, themselves not greatly regular. From the Rock of Cashel, the spiritual and temporal power of kings and bishops spread their rule over the broad lands of Munster in the early Middle Ages. Other times, other priorities. The Dukes of Devonshire once lived in Lismore Castle in the Blackwater Valley. They and their early English neighbours, Sir Walter Raleigh and poet Edmund Spenser, attempted to impose their own order on the land, a fleeting gesture. The poet Yeats once described the streets of London as lonely London pavement grey. But the words apply here just as well. Yeats took refuge not far from this flat expanse of limestone rock of the Burren in County Clare. The Burren is like a moonscape, but not without its hidden beauties. For in the spring and summer, the old green roads of the drovers and the pathways that the sheep tread out lead to drifts of alpine blooms, secret orchids, and the blue gentian. The cliffs of Moher, thrust up from prehistoric seas, produce fossiled stone for the hearths of homes and stately halls. Only the brave press close to the edge, peering down to the dawn of time, where the sea scribbles white waves on the ancient layered rock face. The wild sounds of seabirds counterpoint the piping music of Willie Clancy's music school nearby. The sand dunes of the Kerry coast show a gentler front to the Atlantic Ocean. Famous golf links border the strand and pose the ultimate test of any Irishman. Nearby, Ballybunion is famous for its annual Bachelors' Festival, a contest to find Ireland's most eligible man. The event is not taken too seriously. But just a few miles down the coast, the annual Rose of Tralee contest for women is a more prestigious occasion. Make of the stones a pillow for thy head, and thou shalt see angels ascending and descending, an ancient poet once wrote. 18 miles out in the Atlantic, during the dark ages of the 7th and 8th centuries, this was Western Christianity's last outpost for well over 100 years. 700 feet above raging seas, sits Skellig Michael. The monks' beehive huts still cling like limpets to the rocks. No one today can imagine such harsh isolation and deprivation. Homeric themes of love, death, suffering live in beautiful, simple prose etched from the Irish language in masterpieces of literature. Onthalonach, the Island Man, Fuha Bliana Fós, 20 years a-growing. They were written by people who lived off the end of the Dingle Peninsula. These are treacherous waters, the grave alike of ships of the Spanish Armada whose names ring down the centuries like a litany, and of those people in this century who lost their lives following the shoaling of mackerel for a living. As they said themselves, their like will not be seen again. Their descendants, who live along the eastern seaboard of America, often celebrate the old days in the next parish across the seas, for Dingle is the next town to America. Ancient texts say St. Brendan the Navigator and his monks set out from these parts before Columbus or Leif Erikson. Just as Patrick and other missionaries brought the faith to Ireland, Ireland's people in turn have shared their values with the old and the new world ever since. It's entirely right that places like Waterville and Valentia were the basis from which the first telephone cable was laid for the modern communications era. The towns today are popular destinations along Ireland's famous Ring of Kerry. May morning, once every 7 years, the magical day of the ancient god Baal, the chief of the O'Donohues, rises from the waters of Loch Lean on a white steed. Such stories about particular families are still told in their particular areas of origin. In Ireland, there's always been a fierce determination to keep the name on the land. And still the McCarthys, the O'Neills, the O'Byrnes and the Clancys can be found where they've always been, as rooted as the 10,000-year-old yew forests in the mountains around Killarney. In the south coast's many-fingered inlets, the sea's delivery has brought 1,000 ships, and seen as many go. From Wexford and Waterford to Bantry Bay, the sea has been a trade route, a playground, and a grave. British fleets have sheltered and been supplied, where legendary Milesians made their first landfall in leather-covered boats. Vikings, Normans, booty hunters from far and near have sought the river mouths of Nore and Suir, Blackwater and Lee, safe havens from which to seek further fame and fortune. Like soldiers in every age, the garrison of the great star-shaped 17th century Charles Fort gave fanciful names of birds of prey to their cannon, names like Falcon and Striker. The fort is now restored as part of Ireland's mixed heritage of invaders and invaded. One of them, a McCarthy chief, is supposed to have used his silver-tongued eloquence to persuade the First Elizabeth to let him keep his stronghold at Blarney Castle. The gift of the gab persists and is claimed by the lilting tones of Corkmen, poets, sculptors, and masters of the short story, like Frank O'Connor. After enduring centuries of invasion, tens of thousands of Irish families were forced to give up their homeland in the mid-1800s. Famine and destitution drove them onto the trackless sea. It became a road where those who'd gone before were a small, far-off light beckoning to those languishing at home. The Irish word for emigrant, Joree, holds within its teardrop meaning a tide of sorrow which has carried away 1,000,000 hearts. As they set sail across the Atlantic, the last visible bit of Ireland fading into the grey was Fastnet Rock. For those who were able to return, it emerged as the first tangible sign of home. As one saying goes, the times they are a-changing. The wild geese return along the beckoning beacon of better times, or never have to go away at all. For centuries, the most settled part of Ireland was England's very limited bridgehead, the Pale, part of the province of Leinster, and the only place the Crown's writ ran freely. Here, the organizing flair of the Norman invaders introduced religious orders from the continent, Cistercians, Augustinians. Man's interaction with his fate and his attempts to divine powers beyond his daily existence here go back beyond the Great Pyramid of Egypt to Neolithic Newgrange. Here the sun's rays still strike directly into this mounded burial chamber at each dawn of the winter solstice. The cycle of birth and death and the rhythm of the year's work was settled and celebrated in rituals that still retain their mystery. These are sacred lands, recognized as such by successive cultures. The High Kings at Tara held annual festivals and claimed a wary allegiance from minor kings and chieftains. The old Irish ballad, The Rocky Road to Dublin, is now a tuneful counterpoint to the city's high-speed connections. Dublin's tempo is ever quickening. Europe's chattering classes and culture vultures have made it an essential stage on their grand tour. From the gardens of Stephen's Green to the Temple Bar district, Dublin's new bohemian left bank, you may still meet a friend, an enemy, or a bore round every bend. But Dublin's wit and repartee leaves as little bitterness as you'll find at the bottom of a glass of Guinness. The Ascendancy, founders of the great houses in Ireland, have a mixed reputation. Their contributions to the public and common wealth seldom match the grandeur of their lifestyle. In general, the Anglo-Irish, however, were, in Yeats' words, no mean people. Recurring great names are the Ormond Butlers and the Fitzgeralds, who were the Earls of Kildare and Dukes of Leinster. Their townhouse, now the seat of the Irish Parliament. The Fitzgeralds were once considered the uncrowned kings of Ireland. The one place where the two ends of the social scale met on common ground was at the races. The horse could win a penny or a pound for lord or commoner. The state has inherited and maintains some of the best of the old great houses, where all Ireland's citizens can now visit their treasures and take refreshment on the terraces. The Kilkenny Cats, in their black and amber stripe, are notable modern exponents of hurling. The game began with a small leather ball being struck by teams from neighbouring parishes, the winners being those who, at the end of the day, had penetrated furthest into their opponent's territory. Like diplomacy, it was a more peaceful way to let off steam than the older, murderous faction fights. It was war by other means. The smell of a turf fire is, for Irish people everywhere, a touchstone of memory. The past and the present come together. Where invading Elizabethan armies saw a soggy, savage wilderness where no sensible person would willingly set foot, peat is now milled for the domestic hearth and environment-friendly power stations. Stripping the blanket bog turns back the pages of history, revealing ancient fields and pathways. There Ben Bulben's head is where jealous Fionn of the warrior Fianna finally cornered young Diarmid, with whom his queen Grania had run away. These are heroes of a half-mythical Ireland, which W.B. Yeats invoked to underpin the republican dreams of his own fickle love, Maud Gonne MacBride, the subject of so much of his poetry. The Irish state, which made Yeats a senator, was uneasy with the liberal beliefs of this romantic Protestant. But they finally brought him home to rest in Drumcliff churchyard. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horsemen pass by. the wind has bundled up the clouds over Knocknarea, and thrown the thunder on the stones, for all that Maeve can say. The grave cairn of the powerful Queen of Connaught, who led the men of the West into Ulster to steal the brown bull of Cooley. The epic saga has been recited and embellished from ancient times, one of the great treasures of the Irish language. Like ancient ruins, towering stacks loom off the mainland at Downpatrick Head. Slabs of cliff-like Dumbrista, the broken fort, testify to the dangerous coast and treacherous waters. For centuries, smugglers brought contraband goods, brandy and tobacco ashore in the ports of Ballina and Westport through these ungovernable seas. Clew Bay's 100 islands lay like green stepping stones in a peaceful sea. But once, they were the domain of traders and raiders, the seafaring O'Malleys. The O'Malleys traded with La Coruna and the ports of northern Spain and exacted tribute on the high seas. Their warrior chief was a woman, a she-king, Gráinne O'Malley, Gráinne Whale. Her exploits were so cunning, so daring, that she captured the attention of Queen Elizabeth herself, who extended a royal invitation to visit in London. There was a real Patrick who came to Ireland about the middle of the 5th century. Writings like Patrick's Breastplate and other records testify to his mission. But other, lesser figures have been subsumed into the mixture of fact and legend surrounding him. Very real is the pain for barefoot pilgrims wending their way through early morning mist along the rocks and ridges of Croagh-Patrick. On the last Sunday of every July, hundreds of penitents climb this lonely mountain in an act of expiation and communion with powers acknowledged long before Christianity. Galway City. The town square is overrun with Saturday shoppers on a summer's day. It was once called the City of the Tribes, home to chief Irish families, but may be better titled City of Youth. College students and musicians vie to make their mark here, and come nightfall, the local atmosphere is elbow to elbow, pint to pint fun. The strange quality of light coming in from the far distances of the Atlantic plays among the clouds. It glints on the glacial pools gathered in the rocky folds. It plays hide and seek in and out of the steep sides of the 12 Bens, the range of mountains stretching across Connemara. This is seriously lost country. It will not stoop to suit any human purpose. The mountains brood in lofty silence over the landscapes below, inspiring the palettes of Paul Henry and a generation of Irish landscape painters. High Brazil, the Isles of the Blessed. As legend has it, a mirage in the sea. The mysterious Aran Islands may have inspired the legend of Oisin, the blue-eyed boy of the Fianna warrior band, riding on a white horse with Niamh of the golden tresses to the land of eternal youth. But it's hardly the same place where seaweed from the shore was once brought in baskets to create small fields among the barren rocks. Dunengus, the ultimate in unassailable fortresses. Were the people who barricaded themselves here driven to the edge of doom, or survivors of a lost Atlantis? Some would have it they and their descendants share in a common strand of a culture stretching along 1,000 miles of the Atlantic seaboard, south to Spanish Galicia and North Africa. Certainly, the rhythms and cadences of speech, and above all the music of these parts, have echoes from far-off places. The Shannon, the longest river in Ireland, sweeping onward broad and clear, stringing along its bright course beads of lakes, and rushy shallows with the moorhen clucks and calls to the pleasure boats cruising uncluttered waters. Guarding the western approaches from Limerick to Connacht, Bunratty Castle stands foursquare by the mouth of the Shannon. The O'Briens, lords of Thomond, like other great Irish families, took different sides in the political fortunes of the day. Moira Rua, widowed in the wars of the 17th century, married an enemy soldier to hold their patrimony for her sons. The hills of Donegal, Errigal, and the Blue Stacks look out at the North Atlantic. The mountainy people looked north and east around Inishowen, following the track of Iona's Columkill to Scotland. In yesteryear, when the seasonal potato pickers, the tatty hokers, were away, there weren't enough men for a football team. The harvest now is different. Treasure from the sea spills around the harbours and small towns, from Killybegs to Burtonport. Eyrie of the Golden Eagle, Slieve League's sheer rock face, one of the highest in all Europe, did not save the bird from extinction in Ireland. But the vertical landscape here may be the inspiration of a notable Donegal profession, expertise in digging underground. Wherever earth is moved the world over, there the spirit moves and brings the famed tunnelers of Donegal. Images of the mortal boat ferrying souls to the other world. In Seamus Heaney's work, Station Island, the phrase, "hurry of bells," summons him to find himself again. St. Patrick's Purgatory has been the Mecca of the Gael for 1,000 years. Princes came here from Compostela to go through the inferno within and wrestle with Dante's demons. People who come to Station Island today face a similar ritual. 3 days of fasting, bare feet shuffling about the rounds, the penance patterns of flinty stone. The only way out is to look within. Rats cannot survive on Tory. Its soil wards off misfortune. A solitary place, its islanders nicknamed their winter enemy, the deadly sea passage to the mainland, the Crucifier. Having made that first small journey, former Tory islanders the world over travel with a pinch of island earth, a universal talisman, a corner near the heart, forever Tory. A prime pastoral expanse. The north has been a place of settlement long before the Vikings sailed up Strangford Lough. Ancient shore dwellers have left their heaps of shells, a precarious hold on a new shore. The traffic here has been back and forth, both east and west, the Scottish kings extending their rule across the narrow seas, a mixing of peoples, sometimes easy, not always so. The men and women from the Scottish borders came into Carrickfergus and other ports, and often took their tough resourcefulness onwards to the New World. A long line of American presidents is a roll call of honor of the qualities of the Ulster Scot. The bleaching greens of the Lagan Valley supplied the mills, and Belfast linen and Belfast ships spread a byword for excellence around the world, records of the industry of the 17th century settlers. Derry, Londonderry. Derry of Columkill and the London Guilds have looked both ways. Taking northern poet John Hewitt's advice in style, be your own man. Very much his own man was the eccentric Earl Bishop, who built this palace and a lady's bower above the crashing seas. The bones of Dunluce Castle are a proper setting for the daring exploits of famous chieftain Sorley Boy MacDonald, whose history straddles the narrow seas to Scotland and all of Ulster's history.
Should you wander far away, should you set your heart a sail, should you go
When you look upon Ireland, what do you see? One writer saw people made out of the wet, limey soil. Others saw dreamers and mystics, warriors and chiefs, or a cruel Celtic streak shaped and fashioned by the place they came from. Heaney sees its writers and artists who, in his words, capture the impulse of pleasure in the presence of natural phenomena. The land continues to leave its mark on Ireland's people, and they carry that gift wherever they go. Perhaps the sentiment is better stated in this Irish poem. And dearer the wind in its crying, and the secrets the wet hills hold, than the goldenest place they could find you, in the heart of a country of gold.
dreams grow cold, but our love is strong as death. I will give my dying breath, you know I will. Should you wander with the tide, you will find me by your side. We are two Will